The wind over Black Hollow didn't whisper, it screamed. It screamed through the broken teeth of old barn planks, through the holes of wind-burned fences, through the hollow skulls of cattle long dead under a merciless western sun. The land itself seemed alive, restless, gnawing at its own memory, and when Jeremiah Cole first rode over the ridge that morning, staring down at the valley that was now his, the land he'd purchased for nearly nothing, he felt the air pull something from his chest, not breath, not fear, something older, something he couldn't name. He dismounted slow, his boots crunching the red dust, and stood before the shack that came with the deed, a slanted skeleton of timber, windowless and silent, but it wasn't the house that made him freeze. It was the shadow behind it. A shadow far too tall to belong to any man. They told him in town, half drunk and half mad, that no one bought land in Black Hollow twice, that it had been sold 7 times in 30 years, and every buyer either vanished or left screaming. He'd laughed then. He wasn't the kind of man who scared easy. He'd fought off bandits in Arizona, hauled gold through Apache country, buried more than a few friends beneath desert stones, but the silence here, the silence felt wrong, like the world had forgotten to breathe. He stepped closer to the shack, his hand resting near his revolver's worn grip. The air smelled of something sweet, not flowers, not whiskey, something like wet dirt and rusted iron. He pushed the door open. Inside, the air was colder, shadows clung to the corners like cobwebs, dust hung thick, stirred by his boots. The walls were carved with strange markings, long vertical lines, uneven, as though something with enormous fingers had traced them while pacing in the dark. He whispered to himself, "Ain't no." But the floorboards creaked and answered. A long, low moan of wood bending under weight heavier than his own. He spun around, and there she was, 0.9 feet if she was an inch, barefoot, pale as bone under moonlight, eyes glimmering with something not quite human, not rage, not sorrow, but a knowing that cut deeper than both. Her hair, long and black as coal smoke, hung in heavy ropes across her shoulders. She didn't move. Didn't blink. And when she finally spoke, her voice rolled through that shack like thunder trapped in a well. "Get naked, little man." He froze, not in shame or fear, but confusion. Her tone wasn't playful. It wasn't cruel. It was ancient, commanding, like a ritual more than a demand. He took a slow step back, heart pounding. "Lady, I don't know who you think. Get naked," she repeated, slower this time. "You bought this land, and what comes with the land must be claimed." Her eyes flickered to the dirt floor, where the faintest shimmer of movement twisted beneath the cracks. The ground breathed. Jeremiah stumbled back into the sunlight, gasping. The wind hit him hard, snapping him back to reality. But when he turned, the shack was empty again. Quiet as if she'd never been there. That night, he camped near the old well a few yards from the shack. The moonlight spilled silver over the hills, painting everything ghost pale. He poured himself a shot of bourbon and tried to laugh at his nerves. "Big woman, big imagination," he muttered, but deep down, he knew what he'd seen, and he knew no drink could wash it clean. The sound came again, the whispering wind, but this time, it wasn't the wind. It was words. A low, rhythmic murmur, coming from the well. He crept closer, lantern raised, peering into the blackness. The air that rose from it was cold, colder than the night around him, and beneath that chill, he heard it, a woman's voice humming a tune that didn't belong to this world. A hymn maybe. Or a curse. He tossed a small rock in. The echo never came back. Something was down there. He didn't sleep. The coyotes didn't howl. The land itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. By morning, Jeremiah was sweating under the heat, shoveling dirt near the old corral to clear space for his horses, but every few minutes, his eyes flicked toward the shack, toward that dark doorway that looked more like a wound than an entrance. When he dug about 2 feet down, his shovel hit something hard, wood, maybe. He knelt and brushed the dirt away. A box, small, blackened by time, inside were bones, not of an animal, not of a man, too long, too thin. Wrapped around them, strands of black hair, tied like rope. Jeremiah stumbled backward, his vision blurred. For a moment he swore he saw movement, the bones twitching, shifting toward the sunlight. He grabbed the shovel, hurled dirt back into the hole, and covered it. Fast. By evening, he'd packed his horse, ready to ride back to town and sell the land for whatever he could get. But when he turned toward the ridge, the path was gone. The valley stretched endless in all directions. No horizon. No exit, just the shack, the well, and the whisper of a woman's voice calling his name. Jeremiah. It came from everywhere. It came from inside him. He dropped to his knees. "What do you want?" he shouted. The wind answered with laughter, then, silence again. He stood, trembling, the revolver shaking in his grip. He fired once into the air, just to hear the echo, to prove sound still worked here, but no echo came back, only the deep groan of earth shifting, and then he saw her, standing at the edge of the field, tall, motionless, watching. That night, the moon vanished and the stars blinked out one by one, until darkness swallowed the valley whole. Jeremiah sat inside the shack, lantern light flickering, revolver in hand. He could hear her footsteps outside, slow, heavy, too heavy for human feet. Each step thudded through the ground, rattling dust from the ceiling beams. He aimed the gun toward the door. "Show yourself," he barked. Silence followed. Then the doorknob turned. When the door creaked open, there was no one there, only the night, vast and empty. He stepped outside, heart racing, and saw her shadow stretch across the valley floor, though no moon shone above. It was moving closer. He turned to run, but the ground itself rose up. The dirt split open in a crack that glowed red beneath. From that wound in the earth, a whisper slid out like smoke. She was buried alive. Jeremiah stumbled back. What? She was buried alive, Jeremiah Cole. The woman who came with the land. She guards what men tried to steal. You bought her grave. The voice wasn't hers this time. It came from the earth, from the bones beneath his boots. He backed away toward the well, breath ragged. The wind howled again, and this time he saw faces in it, flickering shapes of men, their eyes hollow, their mouths screaming soundlessly. Past owners of the land. He fell to his knees, clutching the dirt. "What do you want from me?" The answer came in her voice, low and cold, obedience. "The land takes what it owns." The ground trembled. The air cracked with invisible thunder. The wind roared with thousands of whispers. And in the dark, she stepped forward, closer, taller, more real than anything he'd ever seen. The next morning never truly came. The sun rose, but it felt wrong, pale, bloodless, a white eye in a colorless sky. The light had no warmth. The air tasted of metal. Even the horse refused to move, muscles tense, nostrils flaring toward something unseen. Jeremiah felt the weight of the night still pressing down on his shoulders, like the valley had trapped the darkness and refused to let it go. He poured what was left of his bourbon onto the dirt, muttering a prayer his mother had taught him as a boy, a prayer for restless souls. The liquid vanished instantly, swallowed by thirsty ground. Then the whisper came again. "You shouldn't have covered the bones." He froze. The voice wasn't behind him, nor ahead, it was inside his skull, soft and cold. He turned slowly toward the shack. The door was open again. He knew he'd latched it. He'd seen himself latch it. Something inside was moving, not walking, not crawling, but drifting, like a shadow unmoored from its body. He stepped forward, drawn by that same strange pull that had brought him here in the first place. The air inside the shack shimmered. The marks on the wall, those long finger-like grooves, glowed faintly red now, like veins lit by fire beneath old skin. And then, the room changed. The walls were still there, but they weren't wood anymore. They were clay. Fresh, wet, breathing. And in the center, kneeling on the dirt floor, was the woman. The 9-foot woman, her form less monstrous now, more tragic. Her face, though pale and stretched by sorrow, held the beauty of something divine made to suffer among men. She looked up at him, and he saw the truth in her eyes, not rage, not hunger, but remembrance. Her voice came softer this time, carrying the weight of centuries. "They buried me alive here, little man. They built their homes and barns over my body, and when I screamed, they called it thunder." He stumbled out into the daylight, gasping for air that didn't taste like dirt and death. His horse was gone. Only its hoofprints remained, circling the well again and again until they vanished into the earth. He wanted to run, to leave everything behind, but there was nowhere to go. Every direction he looked, the same valley stretched endlessly. The ridge he'd crossed was gone, replaced by walls of jagged stone. He was trapped. That's when he saw it, the black tree. It hadn't been there before. A twisted oak standing alone by the far fence, its bark dark as tar, its branches stretching like claws toward the sky. Something about it called to him. He approached slowly, boots sinking into soft ground. At the tree's base lay a single object, a rusted locket, its chain half buried in the soil. He picked it up, brushed it clean, and opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded sketch, a man and a woman. The woman's eyes were unmistakable. The same pale fire. The man, he realized with horror, was him. The locket slipped from his hand. It landed in the dirt with a dull thud. He staggered back, heart racing. No, no, that's not possible. That ain't me. But the face was the same. The same scar on the cheek. The same hollow eyes. The woman's voice drifted to him again, carried by the wind. You've been here before, Jeremiah. Every man who buys this land is you. The world seemed to tilt. His vision blurred. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. Images flooded his mind, flashes of different men, different faces, different times. Miners, ranchers, soldiers, all standing where he stood now, all hearing the same voice, all vanishing into the earth. It was a cycle. A curse. A loop that never ended. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. Night fell faster this time. The sky didn't fade, it collapsed. One moment sunlight, the next pure black. The stars blinked out again, leaving only the faint red glow from the earth's cracks, pulsing like the heartbeat of something buried deep below. He wandered toward the well. The whispering had returned, louder now, almost melodic. He leaned over the edge, the lantern trembling in his grip. And he saw faces. Dozens of them, floating in the dark water, pale, distorted, eyes open, mouths moving without sound. Among them, one face rose higher than the rest. The 9-foot woman. Her lips parted, and though the words came without breath, he heard them clearly. Take off what the world gave you. Strip away what they built. Only then will you see. He understood now. Get naked, little man, it wasn't lust. It wasn't mockery. It was commandment. To shed everything false. Everything human. To stand before the truth bare, without pride, without body, without self. The realization hit him like thunder. The realization hit him like thunder. He stumbled back, the lantern falling from his hand and shattering on the rocks. The flame caught the dry grass, spreading fast, painting the night in gold and smoke. The wind howled, carrying the fire toward the shack. The valley lit up in a storm of color, orange and red and the deep violet of the burning sky. And in the heart of that fire, she stood again. The 9-foot woman. Unburning. Unmoving. Her eyes twin stars in a dying world. She lifted her hand, and the fire stilled. Smoke curled around her like a veil. Jeremiah dropped to his knees, weeping. What do you want from me? Her expression softened, almost tender. I want you to remember. Remember what? That you are me. The ground split open beneath him. Heat surged upward, blinding white. And for a heartbeat, he saw it, the truth. He saw her chained to the earth, buried alive, her fingers clawing at the dirt. He saw himself, or versions of himself, standing above her, shovel in hand, looking down without mercy. He saw greed, and fear, and the weight of guilt passed through blood and bone. He had been one of them. The men who killed her. The men who buried her for gold that never existed. And every lifetime since, he had come back, reborn into new flesh, doomed to buy the land again, to face her, to remember. He fell into the well. Down, down, through water thick as oil, through screams that weren't his, through time itself. And when he opened his eyes again, he was standing in the field. Morning light spilled over the valley like nothing had happened. The shack was new again, freshly built. The air smelled of promise. A man rode up the ridge, holding a deed in his hand. He waved. "Name's Jeremiah Cole," the man said. "Bought this land off the bank." And the voice that answered him, smooth, low, and echoing from everywhere, belonged to the 9-foot woman. "Welcome home." Jeremiah Cole woke with the taste of earth in his mouth. He sat upright, coughing, dirt pouring from his lips like ash from a dying fire. The sky above him was blue again, clear and gentle, as though the night of burning and madness had never happened. But the valley was different. The grass moved like it was breathing. The air shimmered faintly, carrying whispers too quiet to catch but too close to ignore. Every blade, every rock, every shifting shadow hummed with life that wasn't life, as if the world had swallowed a soul too large for its throat. He rose unsteady, hands trembling, and stared at the shack. It was whole again. No scorch marks. No broken beams. No trace of the inferno that had devoured it. And yet, when he stepped closer, his boots sank into ash. He touched the doorframe. It was warm, pulsing faintly beneath his palm. Almost like skin. Inside, the smell of old wood was gone, replaced by something sharp, metallic, the scent of iron and wet stone. The marks on the walls were still there, but now they glowed faintly gold instead of red. And in the center of that circle, a chair. Old. Wooden. Waiting. He didn't know why, but he sat. As soon as his body touched the seat, the air thickened. Time bent. A voice whispered near his ear. "Now you remember what you were. But do you remember what you did?" The world melted. Suddenly he wasn't Jeremiah Cole anymore. He was another man, same hands, same eyes, but younger, sharper, crueler. The year was 1849. The valley was new, untouched, rich with gold dust and water veins. Men called it Hollow Heaven. He saw himself standing with 4 others, shovels in hand, sweat dripping from their brows, greed burning in their eyes. They'd come not to build, but to take. To dig until the land bled wealth. And she had been there. The woman. Not yet the monster. Not yet the legend. She'd stood between them and the earth, tall even then, beautiful, wild, half-mad with a kind of sacredness the world no longer understood. "This land is alive," she had said. "It will not be owned." They had laughed. They'd called her a witch. A pagan. A liar. When the first man struck his pick into the soil, the ground had screamed. Not thunder, not quake, a voice. A deep, furious voice that shook their teeth. But greed is louder than guilt. They'd kept digging. When she fought them, they'd bound her. When she cursed them, they'd silenced her. When she begged for her husband's life, they'd thrown him down the well. And when she refused to kneel, they buried her alive. The memory played in his mind like a fevered dream, their torches, her screams, the sound of dirt hitting flesh. The other men laughing to drown the sound. And one voice above all, his own. "Let the land take her if she loves it so much." The vision shattered. Jeremiah gasped, sweat streaming down his face. The shack spun around him. He could still hear her screams, echoing across time, burned into the roots of the valley itself. The chair beneath him cracked. The circle on the floor glowed brighter. The voice returned, no longer whispering, now it filled the air like thunder rolling through water. "You buried me in hunger, and so the land will never be full. You buried me in pain, and so the earth will never rest. You buried me alive, and so you will live until you learn what death means." Jeremiah fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The air turned heavy, pressing down until his ribs ached. He choked out, "I didn't know, I didn't remember. Remembrance is the punishment," she said. And she appeared again, not as a ghost, not as a woman of horror, but as something between divinity and decay. Her body was formed of dust and moonlight, her hair a storm of black threads drifting in unseen wind. She walked toward him without sound, and with every step, the shack's walls dissolved into endless sky. They stood now in the valley again, but not the valley he knew. This was older. Untouched. The river still ran clear. The hills still sang with life. She gestured toward it. This tree grew from my bones. Every branch a memory. Every root a sin. He saw faces within the bark, men's faces, including his own, twisting in agony, mouths open as if still screaming centuries later. He staggered back, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. "I can't undo it," he whispered. "Tell me what to do." She leaned closer. "Get naked." The words came soft, but they tore through him like lightning. And this time, he understood. He stripped off his coat, his shirt, his boots, until he stood bare under the red sun. But the nakedness she meant wasn't of skin. It was of soul. He felt the land beneath him hum, alive, ancient, waiting. She stepped closer, her hand touching his chest. Cold as stone. Warm as forgiveness. Both at once. "Let go of the man," she said. "Let go of the name. Let go of the weight." He closed his eyes. The wind rose, wrapping around them like a shroud. The valley trembled, the tree shook, the air filled with light so bright it felt alive. Every sin he'd carried, every lifetime he'd walked this cursed path, burned away. He saw flashes of them all, miners, ranchers, soldiers, wanderers. Every one of them him. Every one of them blind. And in that moment of surrender, something broke. The ground split open, but not in rage this time, in release. The tree cracked, its black bark peeling to reveal gold light within. The faces screamed once more, then smiled, fading like smoke in dawn. The woman, the 9-foot woman, looked down at him, her form softening, her eyes losing their fury. "Now you see," she whispered. "The land never wanted vengeance. It wanted truth." He opened his eyes. "Am I free?" She smiled faintly. "Freedom isn't escape, Jeremiah. It's remembrance without pain." Then she began to fade. Her towering frame dissolved into dust and wind, her shadow lingering only a heartbeat longer before the valley swallowed it whole. Jeremiah stood alone again, naked under the sun, surrounded by silence so deep it felt sacred. The air was warm now. The grass no longer whispered. The well stood dry and harmless, its stones crumbling with age. The curse, it seemed, had ended. He knelt and pressed his palm to the dirt. It pulsed once beneath his hand, like a heart saying goodbye. And then he felt it, peace. Real, unshakable peace. He whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried his words away. But peace in the west never lasts long. From far off, Jeremiah heard the low rumble of hooves echoing through the valley. A wagon appeared on the ridge, strangers, bright-eyed and smiling wide, waving a fresh land deed in their hands like a promise of new beginnings. Jeremiah stood slowly, pulling on his torn clothes, his face carved with understanding deeper than time itself. He knew this rhythm, the illusion of ownership, the cycle of ignorance and return. He had broken it once, but the land remembered everything. Too long, too deep, too ancient for one man to truly heal. For a brief moment, Jeremiah swore he saw her, the 9-foot woman, standing beside the newcomers at the valley's edge, her immense form softened by the fading light, her hand resting gently on the youngest man's shoulder. She wasn't angry now, not vengeful, just watching, like the land itself observing those who dared to claim it. The wind rose, curling through the grass and whispering with a voice he would never forget, "Let's see if they remember." Jeremiah turned toward the horizon as the sun sank low, bleeding gold into the dust and shadows, painting the valley in that strange hour between peace and promise. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile carved from sorrow and surrender. Some stories, he realized, never truly end, they just learn to breathe again. The next morning bled through the cracks of the saloon walls like a slow confession. The storm had passed, but the air still trembled with what it had left behind: secrets, echoes, ghosts. Ethan Cross stepped outside, boots crunching against broken glass and ash. The wind was soft now, almost tender, but beneath it lingered whispers from the night before, his own voice among them, raw and desperate, bargaining with something no man should ever bargain with. He lit a cigarette, the flame trembling at the edge of dawn, and stared toward the black horizon. The devil wasn't done. He could feel it beneath his skin, a fever that wouldn't cool, a promise that wouldn't die. The deal still pulsed. The curse still breathed. Freedom was a word men in this town spoke but never truly owned. And then, she appeared, Clara Graves, the preacher's daughter, the only woman who'd ever seen through the smoke, the sin, the gunpowder, and the whiskey. The only one who dared call him by his real name when everyone else called him sinner. Her eyes were steady, brave in the morning light, but her hands trembled as she held a folded piece of parchment, the kind that could damn a man or save him, depending on who signed it. "He came for you last night," she whispered. "Left this." Cross unfolded the parchment, his hand steady though his breath wasn't. A single line was scrawled in blood: "Debt ain't paid yet, preacher's girl dies next." The cigarette slipped from his lips, hissing as it hit the dirt. The devil had drawn new lines. This wasn't a warning, it was a promise. He turned, jaw tight, eyes burning with something colder than rage. "Where?" She shook her head, voice trembling. "He said he'd find me when the sun dies over the canyon." Cross holstered his revolver with a click that sounded like finality. "Then we ride before it does." The road to Crimson Canyon stretched before them like a wound across the desert, dry, cracked, endless. Every hoofbeat echoed like a countdown, every gust of wind carried the scent of dust and death. The sky burned orange and red, the kind of color that only comes before blood is spilled. And halfway through the ride, Clara finally spoke. For a brief moment, Jeremiah swore he saw her, the 9-foot woman, standing beside the newcomers at the valley's edge, her immense form softened by the fading light, her hand resting gently on the youngest man's shoulder. She wasn't angry now, not vengeful, just watching, like the land itself observing those who dared to claim it. The wind rose, curling through the grass and whispering with a voice he would never forget, "Let's see if they remember." Jeremiah turned toward the horizon as the sun sank low, bleeding gold into the dust and shadows, painting the valley in that strange hour between peace and promise. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile carved from sorrow and surrender. Some stories, he realized, never truly end, they just learn to breathe again. The next morning bled through the cracks of the saloon walls like a slow confession. The storm had passed, but the air still trembled with what it had left behind: secrets, echoes, ghosts. Ethan Cross stepped outside, boots crunching against broken glass and ash. The wind was soft now, almost tender, but beneath it lingered whispers from the night before, his own voice among them, raw and desperate, bargaining with something no man should ever bargain with. He lit a cigarette, the flame trembling at the edge of dawn, and stared toward the black horizon. The devil wasn't done. He could feel it beneath his skin, a fever that wouldn't cool, a promise that wouldn't die. The deal still pulsed. The curse still breathed. Freedom was a word men in this town spoke but never truly owned. And then, she appeared, Clara Graves, the preacher's daughter, the only woman who'd ever seen through the smoke, the sin, the gunpowder, and the whiskey. The only one who dared call him by his real name when everyone else called him sinner. Her eyes were steady, brave in the morning light, but her hands trembled as she held a folded piece of parchment, the kind that could damn a man or save him, depending on who signed it. "He came for you last night," she whispered. "Left this." Cross unfolded the parchment, his hand steady though his breath wasn't. A single line was scrawled in blood: "Debt ain't paid yet, preacher's girl dies next." The cigarette slipped from his lips, hissing as it hit the dirt. The devil had drawn new lines. This wasn't a warning, it was a promise. He turned, jaw tight, eyes burning with something colder than rage. Where? She shook her head, voice trembling. He said he'd find me when the sun dies over the canyon. Cross holstered his revolver with a click that sounded like finality. Then we ride before it does. The road to Crimson Canyon stretched before them like a wound across the desert, dry, cracked, endless. Every hoofbeat echoed like a countdown, every gust of wind carried the scent of dust and death. The sky burned orange and red, the kind of color that only comes before blood is spilled. And halfway through the ride, Clara finally spoke. Clara Graves stood at the edge of the canyon, her dress torn and dust-stained, her trembling hand still clinging to the remnants of a man turned to legend. She'd buried what little she could find, a revolver scorched by fire, a burnt hat, a half-melted silver cross. There wasn't much left of Ethan Cross, but his name still drifted through the wind like an unfinished prayer. "You found your freedom, Ethan," she whispered, voice breaking. "Just took hell to earn it." As she turned to leave, the wind shifted, sharp, alive, whispering something ancient. A shadow moved across the canyon wall, and from the settling dust, a single horse limped forward, riderless, eyes wild, its coat streaked with soot. Around its neck, tied to the reins, hung a single bullet, the last one he never fired. Carved into it, not dead yet, Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping closer, hand trembling over her mouth. The horse whinnied low, like it recognized her voice, then turned toward the open plains, heading west, toward a bleeding sunset of gold and crimson. For a heartbeat, she swore she saw a figure walking beside it, tall, broad-shouldered, hat in hand, before the mirage broke and dissolved into dust and silence. But out there, beyond the towns and the graves and the law, the whispers began again. They spoke of a man with black eyes and a burned hand, a man who rode only by night, helping the lost find rest, and the guilty find their graves. He never spoke much, they said. Just carried a silver bullet around his neck and a revolver that never missed. Some called him an angel. Others, the devil himself, set loose to balance the scales. But those who looked closer, those who caught the faint glint of mercy buried deep in those black eyes, they knew the truth. Ethan Cross wasn't gone. He was still out there, paying his debt, one sin at a time. A child in a dusty frontier town looked up at the old barkeep and asked, "Mister, is it true that a gunslinger once killed the devil?" The old man chuckled, slow and gravelly, pouring whiskey into a cracked glass. "Son," he said, eyes glinting beneath the shadow of his hat, "around here, the devil was a gunslinger." He took a sip, the silence thick between them, then tapped the side of his glass with a finger scarred by time and memory. "And if you ever ride far enough into the desert, out past where the wind never sleeps, you just might hear him still. Boots in the sand. Whisper in the dust. Gun smoke in the dawn." He leaned in, voice dropping to a rasp that carried the weight of 100 old sins. "Some debts don't end, boy. They just ride on." The camera drifts across the endless desert, where the sun bleeds gold over a sleeping horizon. A lone rider cuts through the morning haze, his coat whispering in the wind, dust swirling in his wake. At his hip, a revolver catches the light, a silent promise, a memory of violence.